Dr. Rangarajan was till May 2014 was Chairman Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister in the rank of Cabinet Minister. Prior to this, he was Chairman of the 12th Finance Commission. He has received many awards, several prestigious awards, including Padma Vibhushan in 2002. A warm welcome to you, sir. A few words about the chief guest, Mr. Amitabh Kant, Institute for Transforming India, popularly known as Niti Aayog, in our library. He attended Manchester, he was a student at Stephens College, St. Stephens, and also subsequently at JNU. He attended Manchester of Management, Ahmedabad. Mr. Kant has been a key driver of initiatives like Make in India, Startup India, and Incredible India. He is an architect of the government policy formulation. He has been honored with several outstanding awards. To name a few, time does not permit to go into the details. Economic Times Policy Change Agent, the Bloomberg TV Personality of the Year, the NDTV Administrator of the Year, One Globe Award 2016 for the leadership in transforming governance for the 21st century. He has recently edited a book titled The Path Ahead, Transforming Ideas for India. This is available, a dozen copies are available in the library, consisting of 27 articles by eminent persons such as renowned scientist, Padma Vibhushan awardee Mashelkar, Harvard Business School Professor Tarun Khanna, industrialist Adi Godrej, banker Naina Lal Kidwai, health expert Shobhana Kamineni, and several others, covering 4 very important aspects of the Indian economy. Number 1, human capital. Number 2, transforming rural India. Number 3, inclusive growth. Number 4, building brand India. He focuses on the importance of new technologies like cloud, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and blockchains to improve productivity in the economy. The topic of today's lecture is the same as the title of the book, namely, The Path Ahead, Transformative Ideas for India. I request him to speak, which will be followed by Dr. Rangarajan's remarks. So I now request Mr. Amitabh Kant to make his presentation. Thank you.
Economist and former Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, Dr. Rangarajan, on whose invitation I am here. Mrs. Yasaswy, who's sitting in the audience, a former teacher of mine, Mr. Kaushik, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and young students who are studying at this very distinguished university. I'm extremely delighted to be here, largely because I was very impressed with the vision and the foresight of Mr. Yasaswy. He's a remarkable human being. A person who's built up 12 universities, 6 business schools, and took education into the heart of Northeast. Rarely will you find an institution builder with such immense vision for expanding education in India, particularly in the field of finance, business administration. And this is what India needed. It needed men of such vision, men of such broad perspective, and a canvas to spread higher education in India and create institutes of excellence. So Mr. Yasaswy was actually ahead of his time. He was a man who was several decades ahead of his time to have created such a fascinating campus here in Hyderabad and to have created many more. I was fortunate to go to the center in Delhi, and I was extremely impressed with the tremendous energy, vibrancy, and dynamism of the young students there. And I'm sure this must be the case in all the 12 universities and all the 6 business schools. No Indian entrepreneur in the field of education has been able to leave such a huge imprint of institution building as Mr. Yasaswy has done. and I think we owe him a deep tribute. For a person who's done so much for education in India, I think it's an amazing achievement what he has done, and I think I'm really honored, really delighted and honored to be delivering this memorial lecture. I am also thankful to Dr. Rangarajan. He is one of our most outstanding and one of our most distinguished economists. As Governor of Reserve Bank, he steered India out of a very difficult phase when India, around the time when Mr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister in 1991, when India opened and liberalized its economy and saved its economy, and India owes a lot to him. So he is himself a great institution builder, and you, all of you here, are very fortunate to have him as your Chancellor. So, ladies and gentlemen, India is growing at about 7.5% per annum. Last quarter, we grew at about 8.2% per annum. But my belief is that India needs to grow at even higher rates of 9 to 10% per annum on a consistent basis year after year, for 3 decades or more, to be able to lift a very young population above the poverty line. India is very, very young, and this, to my mind, the fact that we are 70% of our population below the age of 32, the average age of population is below 29. This is one of our biggest challenges. Rarely has a country not created wealth when it has such low dependency burdens. And the challenge is, to my mind, this is the biggest transition taking place across the world, that the population across the world, across Europe, across America, is getting older and older, and the population in India is getting younger and younger and will keep getting young till 2042. And rarely has a country not created wealth when it has light dependency burden. This is like UK of the 50s and 60s, and therefore it's important that India creates wealth and India generates jobs and is able to grow over a long period of time. And several countries have done this post-World War II. Japan did it for a long period of time, post-World War II, after it was totally devastated in World War II. Korea did it subsequently, and in recent times, China has grown at rapid pace. We were at the same stage of growth 2.5 decades back, but China grew consistently at 10% plus for over 2 decades. And therefore, what does India need to do to go consistently? And we have grown at 9% plus for 5 to 6 years in the past. But what does it need to do consistently to grow at high rates over a 3-decade period? So, ladies and gentlemen, the first thing to my mind is that over the years, we in India have made India very, very complex, very complicated, and a very difficult place for people to do business in. We've added rules, regulation, procedures, acts, paperwork, laws, one after another in central government and in state government, and made India extremely complex for the private sector, because wealth is created by the private sector. The government has to act as a catalyst and as a facilitator. But we made India so complex that we made people very difficult for private enterprise to create wealth. And therefore, in the last 3 to 4 years, one of our attempts has been, how do we make India easy and simple? And what we have tried to do is to do away with a lot of rules, regulation, procedures, paperwork, one after another. We've tried to cut away human intervention, digitize interaction so that external people, when you get in touch with government, you should be able to do it online. And we've used technology to leapfrog. And actually, the country has scrapped over 1,200 laws. So, So one of the main reasons why India in the last 3.5 years has jumped up 65 positions in the World Bank ease of doing business. Yesterday was the last ranking announced. India jumped up another 23 positions. So from 142 to 77 rank, we've jumped up 65 notches in 4 years. Simply because we've cut out human intervention, brought in digital technology, scrapped a vast number of rules and regulation, and therefore made India easy and simple. Now, Government of India is, the central government is one part of India, but India is a very, very large country. It is bigger than 24 countries of Europe. And therefore, much of the action is in states. And how do we make the states easy and simple? And our challenge was to work in partnership with the states. So we created outcomes against which we said we will rank states, and we worked with the states. I was Secretary DIPP then, the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, when we started the ease of doing business in India. And the first thing we did was to start ranking states. With great difficulty, we made the states agree to this on outcomes. And on those outcomes, we ranked states. The first year we did this, Gujarat came number 1. The second year we did this, Andhra came number 1. The third year we did, Telangana beat Andhra and Gujarat and came number 1. But the good thing was that the eastern states, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, brought in massive reforms on labor, on starting business, on a vast range of areas, and therefore they came 4th and 5th. And my belief is that if the eastern part of India starts doing well on ease of doing business and investments start flowing to the eastern part of India, which is mineral rich, then the country will do extremely well. And therefore, we unleashed the competitive spirit among states. And subsequently, when I joined as CEO of Niti Aayog, we started ranking states on health, on education, on water management, on innovation. And my view is that progress takes place when you start measuring and putting it in public domain. So you start ranking states, you start ranking districts, you start naming and shaming, and you start putting it in public domain, and you make good governance as good politics. If you don't put it in public domain, people will not know. But once you start putting it in public domain, people start questioning the elected representatives as to why they are backward in education, why they are backward in health, why they are backward in nutrition. And therefore, this ranking philosophy and naming and shaming is very critical, very, very critical for us. And we started doing this across. And my belief is that this competition among states for ease of doing business will, over a period of time, make India extremely easy and simple. So the first thing is that it's incumbent upon all of us to make India very, very easy, very, very simple, not for the sake of the World Bank, but for India's sake and for the sake of our citizens, because the citizens must have ease of living. And if all of you, when you approach government authorities for birth certificates, for any other necessity, it should be all available online across the table. And therefore, first and foremost, we have to make India easy and simple. The second key thing which we have tried to do in government is at a point of time when everybody is talking about protectionism, and America, Europe, all talking about protectionism, we opened up our foreign direct investment regime. So we opened it up across sectors: insurance, pension fund, e-commerce, construction. Every single area was opened up. And when you get foreign direct investment, you bring in technology, you bring in better competition to local industry. And what we've seen over the last 4 years, that our foreign direct investment have grown by about close to 66% at a point of time when foreign direct investment across the world have fallen. FDI fell across the world by 16%, but FDI in India grew by 60% plus. And therefore, opening of India for foreign direct investment, to my mind, has been a very good thing. And we need to continuously keep opening India to greater and greater sectors. And I think this has been one of the redeeming factors of Indian economy, that we have opened up our regime. The third key challenge to my mind, if India is to grow at high rates over a long period of time, is that how we manage our process of urbanization will be very critical. Every minute as I speak here today, there are 30 Indians who move from rural areas to urban areas. If you go by the latest McKinsey study, by 2050 you will have 700 million Indians moving into urban cities, urban areas. And this means that India's challenge is that in the next 5 decades we have to create 2.5 Americas. When America and Europe urbanized, land, gas, water were all cheaply available. And because they were cheaply available, America had the luxury to live in New Jersey, travel to New York, guzzle gas, so they built limousines, they created limousines to travel, they created cities like Atlanta where 99.8% of the people travel by cars, and they urbanized through what is known as very, very expanded way of urbanization. The challenge is that the process of urbanization has ended across America, it has ended across Europe, it is nearing its completion in China, but the process of urbanization has just begun in India. And in the next 5 decades, we'll see huge amount of urbanization, but there will be very little land, there'll be very little gas, and there'll be very little water. And therefore, the challenge for India is that unlike America and Europe, India has to do very innovative and sustainable urbanization. How do we do compact, dense urbanization? How do we recycle our water? How do we recycle our waste? And how do we bring in greater innovation? How do we bring in electric mobility? How do we store batteries? How do we store India's biggest strength is its availability of sun? And as we move towards renewable power, how do we bring in rooftop energy, which is only possible if we are able to bring in storage and battery? And India has this great ability of getting into sunset industries. How do we get into sunrise industry of electric automobiles, and how do we get into sunrise industry of storage and battery will be one of the biggest challenges, and innovation in these areas will be the key. So ladies and gentlemen, my view is that many of the challenges of urbanization come not from the western part of the world, but they come from the eastern part of the world. How Singapore recycles about almost 12% of its water, all recycled. How they do dual piping, almost 12% of the water which is used for human consumption. In fact, the Prime Minister and President drink water, which is all human recycled. And therefore, or how in Yokohama, a young lady mayor was able to save about 49% of the waste, reduce 49% of the waste through house to household reduction in waste and segregation of waste. Or how Kitakyushu in Japan became one of the most recyclable cities after World War II. You know, Kitakyushu became one of the most advanced cities in manufacturing and industrialization. The Dokai Bay on which it is based became absolutely yellow from blue because power, coal firing, cement manufacturing all came in there. In late 70s, the women of Kitakyushu rose in revolt against the pollution in Kitakyushu. And the Ministry of Trade and Industries worked with them to build Kitakyushu into one of the most smartest and the most recyclable cities. Or in Curitiba in Latin America, where buses are available, mass bus transport system is available to every citizen within 5 minutes of walking. And therefore, many of these lessons come not from the western part of the world, but from other parts of the world, and we need to learn from them to do more innovative and sustainable urbanization. It is important to understand that cities, while they hold only 3% of the earth landmass, actually contribute 85% of the global GDP. They contribute 85% of the global GDP. Cities are centers of growth, they are centers of creativity, they are centers of dynamism, but they also contribute about 72% of the CO2 emissions. And therefore, while cities are important, it's also important that we are able to do it in a very sustainable, developmental manner. We're looking at how do we reduce pollution levels in our cities. And therefore, this challenge is about innovative and sustainable development. The fourth point, according to me, is to sustain the great energy, vibrancy, and dynamism which we have created in our startup movement. And I see this great, tremendous energy which I see I was talking to the director of IIT Mumbai recently, who told me that almost 48% of the students who passed out last year either joined a startup or did their own startup. And in Hyderabad itself, you have the T Hub here, which is a great center of innovation and dynamism. And what we are seeing in India today is a huge emergence of a startup culture, which has been rated to be the third best in the world today. And there's a huge connect with a vast number of great innovation. It's not merely in the e-commerce, where Flipkart has been bought over for $21 billion by Walmart, but we see great innovation in education, in health, and a vast range of social innovation area. So you have Mitra Biotech, which relocated from Silicon Valley into India to do personalized cancer care using artificial intelligence. Or you have a young girl called Aditi who runs a startup called Imbibe, and to improve learning outcomes in Rajasthan and in Haryana, she uses artificial intelligence to track every single student on a longitudinal and latitudinal basis, much like we track Uber vehicles. And because you are tracking every single student, you are able to find out whether the student is able to move up or move down and provide extra teaching to the student in the particular subject that he requires. And technology has been a very, very key driver in many of these areas. Look at a young girl called Pratna Bhandari, who started with an app called Culture Alley to teach Mandarin and Japanese, and soon realized that actually the demand was for teaching English. She created an app called Hello English, and in last year taught 9 million Indians how to speak English. Now this is remarkable. No school, no college has been able to do this, but a young startup has been able to do this. Or look at students from IIT Chennai who started this Ather Energy and have just launched that S340 scooter in Bangalore, which is a smart scooter, electric scooter, where they'll track the behavior of individuals, but more than that, has the potential to be the Tesla of the scooter world of the future. And these are all young Indians who are doing this. So what we are seeing is a massive disruption which is going to take place in India, simply because the startups in India are trying to find solutions to the problems of India. Whereas problem of making fluoride and arsenic-free water, whether we are able to provide, our challenges are very different. The Western world has always innovated. The Western world has innovated. If you go to Silicon Valley, there are very few challenges, but it's a very innovative place. And they find solutions to problems of drones, they find solutions to problems of driverless cars, they have innovated on defense weapon, but these are not the challenges that we have. Our challenge is, how do we provide seed and fertilizer to our farmers based on soil and weather condition on a real-time basis? How do we provide fluoride and arsenic-free water to our citizens? How do we recycle our waste? And so on. And how do we convert our waste into energy? So the challenge for India is to, and for young Indians, is to find solutions to the problems of India. And the challenge, when you are able to find solutions to these problems, you are not finding a solution for the 1.3 billion people of India, but you will be actually finding solutions for the 7 billion people of the world who will be moving from poverty to middle class in the next 1 decade. And therefore, there's a huge market, there's a vast opportunity for all of you to move away from my generation, which only looked for government jobs, but to look for new business opportunity and become entrepreneurs and innovators. And once you become entrepreneurs and innovators, you will find great business opportunity, which will not only be for the domestic market, but for the rest of the world, if you are able to find solutions to India's problems. And my request to all of you is, move away from government jobs, move away from jobs, move away from the normal status quo, but try and disrupt India in a manner in which it has never been done before. And this can only be done by young people like you. The fifth point I want to make is that the country is in the midst of some of the biggest structural reforms which have taken place. And these are remarkable structural reforms. The country has never seen the emergence of one tax regime across the country. The goods and services tax is like bringing one single tax regime across Europe. And this has been an amazing achievement for this country, and Indians need to be proud because it has brought all the states and center together through a GST council and actually made India simple and easy in matters of tax. We've also had the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which to my mind is a legendary reform. Earlier, businessmen could get away by not paying money back to the banks. Those days of not being able to pay back to the banks is all dead. Crony capitalism in India will die out, and so you will have to pay. If you don't pay, then you lose your companies. And this is what IBC will do. And as many businessmen are now realizing that many businessmen are realizing that they're losing their businesses simply because the IBC process starts on. So IBC, to my mind, is a very radical reform. We've also had reforms in RERA, the land. Many middle-class families in Delhi and around and many other places had paid advances to builders who never gave those houses. And so middle class were held up. And RERA has been a radical reform which will bring discipline. Now, bringing in structural reforms causes teething issues. RERA, Insolvency Code, Bankruptcy Code, the GST, all had teething issues. They're all settling down, and I'm sure these in the long run will institutionalize themselves, and in the long run will make India a better place to do business in, bring in predictability, bring in consistency, and I think they will make India a much more cleaner and more transparent place. But to my mind, the biggest reform which India has witnessed has been the reform of all Indians, has been the reforms of direct benefit transfer. Because when I started my government service, most of the money from government used to be transferred from central government to state government, and we used to transfer money from state government to districts and then to panchayats. And by the time it used to reach the beneficiary, there used to be huge leakage. And one of our prime ministers said that only a 15% of a rupee actually reaches the poor beneficiary. The direct benefit transfer has led, and this has been possible, the direct benefit transfer has only been possible because the country today has biometric, and over 1.2 billion people have biometric. We all have mobiles, billion plus mobile, and 1 billion plus bank accounts. And India is the only country which is the jam trinity of 1 billion biometrics, 1 billion mobile, and 1 billion bank account. And therefore, it has been possible for government to transfer money straight into the bank accounts of the beneficiaries. And in over 500 schemes, money has been transferred straight into the bank accounts, leading to a saving of over 90,000 crores to the government. Vast number of fake accounts, vast number of fake teachers, vast number of fake scholarship for students, vast number of gas accounts have all vanished because of the efficiency which the system has brought in. And to my mind, India, which used to be once one of the most inefficient countries in the world, has suddenly become one of the most efficient countries in the world simply because of biometric transfer, direct benefit transfer into the bank accounts of individuals. Many years back, I was working in the fisheries sector of Kerala. One of my challenges was to improve returns to the traditional fishermen who used to get only 20% of the marketed price of fish. We gave them outboard motors, we gave them new fishing nets, we gave them new crafts. We did everything possible, outboard motors, to go much further into the sea. But opening their bank accounts was a nightmare. I ran after, as the managing director of that organization, I ran to physical banks, I ran to physical bank managers, and it was a nightmare. Opening bank accounts for self-help groups took me 8 to 9 months. It was impossible. Know your customer was a nightmare. A fortnight back, I walked into a bank and opened my bank account using my biometric in 1 minute flat. So the paradigm shift in India has been from 9 months to 1 minute in knowing your customer, in the bank opening of bank accounts. And this is what technology has enabled it to do. And we are seeing the great emergence of India as a country for digital payment. We've connected all our banks through unified payment interface, over 140 banks. And the unified payment interface enables you to do digital transactions. The government came up with the Bharat Interface for Money, an app which enables you to do digital payment. It was soon followed by Google Page, which is now known as Google Pay, and soon WhatsApp will do its own WhatsApp payment. And what we've seen is that Indians have moved over to digital payment using their mobile. I have not used my debit card, credit card for over a year. I've just been doing all my transactions using my mobile. And it's one of the simplest things to do. And those of you who've not tried it, please download Bheem and do digital payments using your mobile, which all of you have. And you'll soon realize, to my mind, India is in the midst of one of the biggest transformations, simply because physical banks will die, physical bank managers will end, and India will be probably the first country in the next 4 to 5 years to make debit card, credit cards, and ATM machines all technologically irrelevant, and India will be transacting through mobile phones digitally. And if you see the rise, the huge rise of digital payments, it's all growing on the back of mobile banking and not on the back of debit card, credit cards. In fact, the payment through cards has actually witnessed a sharp decline, and the mobile payments have gone up. So what we are seeing is the use of technology across sectors. And India today, digitally, is very, very advanced. We must understand this. What we've done is public finance management system in government. Every single paisa that we release in government is digitally tracked till the last person. Is fully digitally tracked. Income tax, 99.3% of Indians pay income tax online. Nowhere in the world does this happen. The goods and services tax is all digital, The new Ayushman Bharat scheme, which will link up 150,000 primary health centers to the district hospital with digitally to the district hospital, so that a poor person who goes to the primary health center does not have advice of doctor, will be able to get advice digitally, and prescriptions will all be digital, and the new health insurance scheme of 500 million people. 500 million people means more than the population of America, Europe, and Mexico put together. And 500 million, this is the biggest world health insurance scheme of up to rupees 5 lakhs. It's all cashless, paperless, portable. A person living in Bihar, but working in Tamil Nadu, a Bihari working in Tamil Nadu can carry his scheme because it's portable. But it's all digital. So what India is witnessing is one of the biggest transformations digitally across. But what is the difference between America, Europe, China, and India? The difference is that in America, data is owned by Google and Facebook. In China, it is owned by Tencent and Alibaba. But in India, data will be owned by public entities. And it will be owned by public entities like GST, Ayushman Bharat, UIDAI. And I think it's important. It's important that as we go along, we are able to put out data in public domain so that young startups use artificial intelligence to do innovation for the country. We are able to put out data in so that academic institutions like yours do good research and are able to put out data so that academicians can do good work for India and do innovation for India. And this is important for us. The sixth point I want to make is that India today is in the midst of some of the biggest innovations, technological innovations that are taking place for the global economy from India. Many Indians do not realize this, but over 1,100 international companies have opened their engineering, research, and design centers in India. From IBM to Cisco to SAP, all are innovating in India. If you look at General Electric's ECG machine, which they used to manufacture for $35,000 in USA, they innovated an ECG machine for $3,500 in India, which has enabled them to do an ECG for $1 as compared to $35 in the United States of America. Or look at SAP. I mean, SAP has done every single innovation in India. Every single development of its software has been done in India. Or look at John Decree's 60 HP tractor. It was innovated here in Hyderabad and brought in for the global markets. Or if you look at Honeywell's turbocharger, it was innovated here. Or you look at Samsung's 5G development, the entire 5G development for Samsung has happened in India. So India has demonstrated its great ability to do entrepreneurship, innovation, and skill, to do innovation at remarkably low prices for the rest of the world. And I think it has demonstrated that it has the ability to do cutting-edge innovation from India for the rest of the world. And that's why every single top company of the world is either based, its engineering, research, and development is either based in Bangalore, is based in Hyderabad, or it's based in Pune and now spreading to Gurgaon. So this movement of innovation and research and design from India is happening from here. The eighth point I want to touch upon is the fact that if India is to grow at high rates of 9 to 10%, which is my theme really, of growing consistently of a high rate over a 3-decade period, it's critical that India creates world-class infrastructure. It's very important. India has not been able to create world-class infrastructure. The demand for infrastructure has outstripped supply. And one of the challenges has been that the PPP, the private-public partnership in infrastructure has split apart. And that was largely because before the projects were put out, government had not done due diligence. It had not taken land, it had not taken approvals and put out projects into the bidding, and they ran into problems on a subsequent date. So it's very important that projects are well structured. They have all the approvals, SPV, special purpose vehicles are created. All approvals are housed in that SPV before the bidding is done. But I've now coming around to the view, and based on the experience of last 3 to 4 years, that it may be a better idea for government in several areas, which we have seen in national highway, etc., that the risks of a greenfield projects are enormous. There are huge risks of greenfield projects. And it may be better for government to take the risk of doing greenfield projects, execute projects, but then once the projects are executed and the projects are de-risked and tolls start flowing in, auction them out and bring in through a transparent process private sector to do operation and maintenance. We've recently sold about 15 roads where tolls had come in, and country has gained over $2 billion. And I think increasingly my belief is that airports, etc., which airport authority does, because the government is extremely poor in operation and maintenance. It's government's just not able to do good quality operation and maintenance. It's better to bring in private sector. So creation of world-class infrastructure. Much of this is happening today. 100 smart cities, close to 50 metros, the high-speed train between Mumbai to Ahmedabad, the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor on the back of which new cities are being created. Today it takes 14 hours for goods to move between 14 days for goods to move between the northern part of India to the ports on the western coast of India, and the logistic costs are very high. But end of 2018, you will have the dedicated freight corridor, a train which will carry containers, double-stacked containers, putting goods into the ports. And they will reach the ports on the western coast of India within 14 hours. So the paradigm shift will be from 14 days to 14 hours. That will be the change of goods moving from northern part of India to the ports. And this will bring in huge efficiency into India. So creation of world-class infrastructure is a very big challenge for India, and India must meet this challenge. One of the main reasons why China grew at those rapid rates was its ability to create good quality infrastructure. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I've talked to you about innovation, I've talked to you about startup, I've talked to you about urbanization, ease of doing business. I've mentioned that India needs to open up its economy rather than being a protectionist and so on. But there are several, let me tell you, there are several challenges. And it's important that I tell you what the challenges are. First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, my view is that it's not possible for India to grow at high rates of 9 to 10%, just not possible, till India does not focus very strongly on gender parity. In India, only 24% of the women work. The world average is 48%. And if women don't work, it's not possible for India to create wealth. And therefore, men have a huge responsibility of consciously pushing for women to work. And we must create jobs for women. And this requires a huge focus on women's education, on women's nutrition. Nutrition, we've ended up in a life cycle of malnutrition for women, and especially in rural areas in the eastern part of India. And we need to improve on nutrition. We need to focus on improving learning outcome. And we need to focus on women's jobs. And if we are able to reach the world average of 48%, India will be adding nothing short of $700 billion to its GDP. And therefore, it will take a massive plunge forward on growth simply because women will be working on India. But this requires a huge amount of work, huge amount of mindset change, and it requires a huge amount of enlightenment on the part of men in India. Secondly, it's not possible for India to grow at high rates of 9 to 10% till India doesn't focus on growth with equity. And my belief is that it's not possible to grow if India doesn't have growth in the eastern part of India. You can't have growth in the southern part of India and the western part of India and say that the eastern part of India will not grow. So if you look at the map of India and you were to look at the most backward districts, majority of these districts you will find in the eastern part of India. And therefore, one of our challenges has been to identify the backward districts of India in the Niti Aayog. We don't call them backward, we call them aspirational districts. And what we've done is to identify 49 indicators across nutrition, education, health, financial inclusion, and say that on these 49 indicators, these districts are here, their baseline is here. But in the same state, another district is here. These districts are at 25%, but the same other districts in the same state have achieved 90%. And in India, several districts have achieved 100%. And therefore, how do we push these districts to 90% first and then to 100%? One of our challenges has been, and all these districts are remaining backward, not because they don't have resources. They have resources, they have the similar kind of fund flow. It's just the failure of governance, nothing but the failure of governance and poor administration. There is a vacancy of doctors, there's a vacancy of teachers, and there's just a sheer neglect of good administration. And therefore, we've challenged these districts. We're putting out their rankings, we handhold them, we facilitate them, but we put out their ranking on a real-time basis every day. All these 115 districts are competing with each other to do better performance. And we are seeing a rapid transformation. States have started filling up teachers. Many states have started providing Anganwadi workers. There's a huge focus on nutrition, education, and improvement of learning outcomes. We are taking a test every 3 months in many of these schools, and we are finding a rapid improvement in all these. And unless we are not able to transform these 115 districts, it is not possible for India to grow at high rates. We need to ensure that there is growth with equity, that these districts do equally well, and the eastern part of India grows. The third point I want to make is that it's not possible for India to grow without transforming its agricultural sector. And India has a very vast number of people in the agriculture sector, and the growth in agriculture cannot come without technology. It cannot come without our agriculture e-markets working. It cannot come without providing better seeds and fertilizer. And first, most critically, it cannot come without a better water management in agriculture sector. So technology, better water management, better working of ENAM, because farmers must know what their price is and the agriculture sector is riddled with middlemen. We need to bring in better technology so that farmers are able to get the actual price. And this alone, to my mind, will enable the farmers to get a higher income for their produce. Many more aspects can be talked about, but agriculture will have to be, growth in agricultural production, productivity will have to be a very key component of our growth. And fourthly, ladies and gentlemen, my belief is that it's not possible for India to achieve 9 to 10% growth without laying a huge emphasis on exports. No country in the world has grown without exports. Whether it was Japan post-World War II, whether it was Korea, whether it was China, they've all grown on the back of exports. And to my mind, it's important that India manufactures. We've grown on the back of services sector. It can't be done that you can't keep growing on the back of services sector. You have to fire on all your engines. You have to fire on manufacturing, you have to fire on services, you have to fire on agriculture. And it's important that our micro industries become small, small become medium. Unfortunately, in our country, a small remains small, a micro remains small, a medium remains small. Unless the size and scale of manufacturing improves, we need to do large scale and size of manufacturing so that the cost of production falls and we are able to penetrate global markets. And the fifth point which I want to make is that it's important that while exports are critical for us to penetrate global markets, without that nobody will be able to do it. The fifth point I want to make is that it's important that India uses emerging areas of technology. Artificial intelligence, robots, 3D printers. There is a huge disruption taking place. And artificial intelligence, supercomputers of today enable you to use artificial intelligence and find solutions to your problems. One of the key things that we are trying to do in Niti Aayog is to disrupt school education. We've opened close to 3,000 tinkering labs where we provided robots, 3D printers, Internet of Things to young students from class 6 onwards. And we are seeing that these students are becoming great innovators, great solution finders to their problems. And therefore, India needs to disrupt its school education system, which is the Anglo-Saxon system of education, and bring in a totally new form of education, which enables students to find solutions. And therefore, the future lies in the world of artificial intelligence, blockchain. If blockchain was used, we'll be able to find solutions to all our land record issues. Almost 2/3 of the cases pending in courts all relate to land. We'd be able to track them down. It'll all be on real-time basis. And through artificial intelligence, we'll be able to provide seed and fertilizer to our farmers on a real-time basis, or track our students on a real-time basis. And that is where the future lies. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've given you a perspective of what has been done in the last 4 years. I've given you a perspective of what the challenges are. But these are exhilarating times of India. These are exciting times to live in India. And these are moments when young people make a huge difference. And institutions like ICFAI, and great institution which was created by a founder, these are great opportunities for you. You will never get this opportunity to transform India again. This is the rarest of the rare opportunity which the founder of this institution has created for you. Please do utilize this opportunity and disrupt India in a progressive manner, in a manner in which it has never been done before. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I now request Professor Rangarajan to make his remarks, presidential remarks.
Amitabh Kant, Mr. Mahendra Reddy, Mrs. Yasaswy, and the distinguished audience. We have just 7th Yasaswy Memorial Lecture this evening. This is an occasion to remember the contributions of Mr. Yasaswy. He was an outstanding educationist. He was respected for his scholarship and admired greatly by his students for his teaching skills and abilities. But he went beyond that. He was an educational entrepreneur, having built or having laid the foundation for the creation of the ICFAI group of institutions. As was mentioned, there are 11 universities and 5 or 6 independent business schools under the coverage. It was his vision which created these institutions. In the world of today, competition in any field is competition in knowledge. And that is why we need institutions of excellence like ICFAI. The greatest contribution that we can make and the tribute that we can pay to Mr. Yasaswy is to maintain the high quality of education in these institutions. We are indeed very grateful to Amitabh Kant for his presence this evening and delivering what I would call an inspiring lecture. Mr. Amitabh Kant is an outstanding administrator. There are administrators of various types. There are administrators who are efficient, but they are efficient in maintaining the status quo. But there are administrators who are thinkers. Amitabh Kant is one of them. We have a thinking administrator, one who looks ahead, looks at the task ahead, and changes and creates ideas and programs which will fit in with the need of not today but of tomorrow. So we are indeed very grateful to Amitabh Kant for his presence this evening. In fact, it is said very often about the administrators in our country. A good administrator is one and focuses on not doing the right things, but doing things rightly. That essentially means that your paperwork is very good. But what we really need are administrators who can do the right things. And we are indeed very grateful, and we are indeed very thankful to people like Amitabh Kant for fulfilling that job. He spoke to us about the challenges before us. He talked to us about what we have done in recent years and the kind of achievements that we have already made, but also told us where we need to go and what needs to be done. He talked about technology, he talked about innovation, he talked about the need for startup culture, and he also ended up by saying some of the challenges like improving the education among women and focusing on agriculture, focusing on modern technology, and so on. He talked about the need for achieving high rate of growth. He talked of 8 to 9% or 9 to 10% even of the rate of growth of the economy. One simple number will tell you. India's per capita income today is $1,800. If only India goes at 9% per annum, by 2026, that is 8 years from now, India's per capita income will become $4,000, and then only India will move from being a low middle income country to an upper middle income country. To reach the high income level country, which means a per capita income of $12,000, it will take 22 years if you grow at 9% per annum. So that is a challenge before us. If we have to become a high income country, we need to grow at 9% for a continuous period of 22 years. That is what simple arithmetic will tell you. Therefore, what can be done in order to be able to achieve that? He had many ideas. I think I won't repeat them. And all of them we need to keep in our mind if we really want to progress. Ultimately, the economists talk all about two things that are relevant for achieving high growth. One is the investment rate, and the other is the productivity of capital, or its inverse, incremental capital output ratio. If the country is to move faster, you need to invest more. And if we and to achieve higher growth, not only should we invest more, but also the productivity of capital must also increase. And it is there, I believe, technology comes in an important way, but it is not only technology. Many other things are needed, because you need well-trained people, you need people who are healthy. Therefore, health is important, education is important, technology is important. All of these things will have to come together in order to improve the productivity of the investment. And if we do that, perhaps we will be able to achieve that higher rate of growth. So this is the critical point which we must all understand. We really need to invest a lot more than what we are doing. I will come back to that. But that is not enough. Unless we improve the productivity of capital, unless we get more out of what we invest, we will not be able to achieve that high rate of growth. And that is where all the issues that he talked about, like ease of doing business and innovative ventures and so on, all of that count. And therefore, the way forward lies in both, as I said, achieving a higher rate of investment and also achieving a higher productivity in the productivity of capital. We talked about agriculture. It is true that agriculture has many problems. In fact, one of the problems in agriculture is also even if we increase the productivity, the average size of the land holding is so small that even if you double the productivity, you will not be able to get what we might call a reasonable amount of income. There is also something that people talk about a great deal these days, and that is the fact that jobs are not increasing, even though growth is occurring. Now, there are problems with it. Growth can occur as a result of two things. One is more investment is being made, and therefore more output is coming, and therefore jobs are created. But on occasions, the growth can occur because of better utilization of the existing capacity. We need to note that in the last few years, the investment rate has fallen. I think we should not be blind to that. The investment rate has almost fallen to 28% of the GDP, whereas it used to be some years ago about 33%. Therefore, the growth that we are getting, it is reasonable. The growth that we are getting is as a consequence of better utilization of capacity. But the growth that occurs as a result of new investment is the one that will create jobs. When people are asking why, what is this mismatch between the growth in the output and the growth in employment, my answer is, apart from other factors, there are many other factors, including technology. And if the growth occurs as a result of improved efficiency of the existing capital, you will add some more labor, but not the same as the improvement or the increase in the amount of investment. And therefore, I would emphasize, among other things, that we need to move, if you are focused on higher rate of growth of the economy, we need to move to a higher investment level, and that is the one thing that will give the jobs. But also let me say, some things are optical also. The job market, if you look at some years earlier, has been looking good because of 2 or 3 industries. IT was growing at a very fast rate, and it was absorbing large number of people who are educated. The financial sector was growing at a fast rate, and that was also absorbing a large number of middle class people at that level. Therefore, these 2 industries are now not in that shape. IT is not in a bad shape, but IT is not growing at the same rate as it was growing, let's say, about 5 years ago. The financial sector, of course, has its own problems, and it is also not growing. Therefore, the visibility of job creation has come down. I mean, maybe jobs are growing elsewhere, but the visibility of job is not seen because the 2 major industry groups, which have been responsible for creating jobs, are not doing that well. So as we go ahead, as we move along, yes, we need to grow fast, because as many economists would say, to use the jargon, growth is a necessary condition for better well-being. It's not sufficient. It is a necessary condition for doing. In fact, if you look at our own immediate past, that many social safety nets have been created only when the economy is growing fast. Mr. Kant talked about equity. Equity has many dimensions. He talked about the regional equity, but there are also other connotations to equity. Many people ask the question whether who benefits from growth? What sections of the community benefit from growth? We really need to see that the benefits of growth go to all deciles of population. But there are many ways of dealing with it. He mentioned the example of South Korea and Japan. In these countries, they were not focusing on poverty, they were focusing on growth. But if you grow, if the economy grows at 9% continuously, you can eradicate poverty. And I think that's possible. But until we are able to achieve that rate of growth, we really need to follow a 2-fold strategy of letting the economy grow fast and at the same time addressing the problems of the vulnerable and weaker sections. It is this 2-fold strategy that is good for a country like India. As I said, that many of the social safety nets, like extended food security, all of that have been introduced only when the economy is growing fast, and therefore we continue to focus on higher rate of growth of the economy. There are many, many ideas that have been put before you this evening by Mr. Kant on what we can do in order to be able to achieve higher rate of growth. And in the final analysis, it is his answer. Now, very recently, there was a report which was put out by the Oxford Study Group, which said between 2004-5 and 2015-16, the total number of people who moved out of poverty was 230 million. Therefore, while it is true that still, according to the Oxford study, 28% of the people are still below the poverty line. But the growth can play an important role in alleviating poverty. And therefore, as I said, we need to take into account the many ideas that have been placed before us this evening if you want to achieve and sustain a higher rate of growth, and that must be the goal of economic policy. Once again, let me thank Mr. Kant for
competence of Mr. Amitabh Kant has given a survey of opportunities and challenges. I would also like to thank Professor Rangarajan for explaining about the growth of the GDP and not adequate growth in employment, and also focused on one important aspect, namely inclusive growth. Now, inclusive growth is also one of the 4 sections of the book by Mr. Amitabh Kant. Once again, I'd like to thank Mr. Amitabh Kant for visiting us and for finding time in spite of his extremely tight schedule. I request Professor Rangarajan to present a memento to Mr. Amitabh Kant.
స్టార్టప్ ఇండియా, మేక్ ఇన్ ఇండియా లాంటి విప్లవాత్మకమైన చర్యలతో దేశ ప్రజలందరి దృష్టిని ఆకర్షించిన నీతి ఆయోగ్ చీఫ్ ఎగ్జిక్యూటివ్ ఆఫీసర్ అమితాబ్ కాంత్ ప్రస్తుతం మనతో ఉన్నారు. వారిని అడిగి ఎకానమీకి సంబంధించిన అంశాలపై 1-2 అభిప్రాయాలు తెలుసుకునే ప్రయత్నం చేద్దాం. సో గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్ మిస్టర్ అమితాబ్. So after GST and the IBC, such a big reforms have so far happened in this country. So after that, what kind of reforms, the big reforms do you
I think the country
foresee?
is working on a vast range of social sectors now. So we've had reform. A vast number of things have been done in the nutrition sector. Huge reforms have been brought in the health sector. In the whole Ayushman Bharat scheme, linking up primary health center to district hospitals, creating a completely new insurance scheme of 500 million people of insurance up to 5 lakhs.
Right.
These are all remarkable achievements and bringing in major changes in higher education sector, providing autonomy to institutions, spreading online education, many other things that have been done. These are major reforms, and now our focus is on improving learning outcomes. The focus is on aspirational districts, many major things, and on infrastructure.
Okay, right, thank you.